Hi, boys and girls. So today we are going to continue building our historical fiction story mountain. You'll remember that yesterday we worked on the first 4 events. So today we're going to work on the second set of 4 events. So again, the materials that you need is your printed copy of the story mountain. Unless you maybe drew it on a piece of paper, that's fine too. Some Post-its or some type of sticky notes and a pencil, because I want you to be actually doing this work throughout the lesson. So I want you pausing. I'm going to show you what to do just like yesterday. You can pause and you can do the same thing and go through it that way. And this is great. That'll be great because you'll have your story mountain done by the end of this video. So yesterday we talked about the first 4 events. The first one being an overview maybe of what the character's life was like before their immigration journey, how or when the character learned that they were immigrating to America, the beginning of their immigration journey. We talked about what you could write about in a journal entry that took place mid-journey. We talked about all of those details that we learned about the journey from one country to America through our research. So for our 5th event on our story mountain, I want you to remember this is actually the pinnacle of the mountain, okay? So this is the turning point or the climax. So at this point, the main problem should be resolved in some way or another. So if you haven't figured out what exactly your problem is yet, then that's a problem. And you're gonna have to go back to your earlier events and fix that up and start building that problem through the rising actions. But I'm sure most of you have done that correctly and are now ready to write that diary entry, which is also going to be the turning point in your story. So some things that you can maybe write about or talk about in your turning point event is maybe what happens when they arrive in New York City. What do they see? Do they see the Statue of Liberty? Are they so sick they can't see it all? What has happened? You know, what is the vibe like when they finally get there? And I think that we can all probably imagine that it was probably an exhilarating experience to finally pull into New York Harbor after 2 to 3 long weeks at sea, moving to your new home and finding that new life that you're in search of. You can talk about what happens when they enter Ellis Island and what the process was like. Through our research, we've learned a lot about Ellis Island. We've learned that, again, it was close quarters. We learned that you did not just automatically get through. We learned that if they even thought you were sick, it was a really big problem. Families were separated. Children were taken from their parents. Many people actually were turned away and sent back to their country for many different reasons. So we know that the Ellis Island experience was probably one of great stress. And because it's the turning point, I want you to really focus on what is changing for the main character. What has changed? Because remember, in a turning point, not only is the problem being resolved, but something is changing because the story is actually turning. And also, like I said, think about how that problem was actually resolved. And you want to use lots of details here. You want to storytell here to show the reader how things are changing and why. So I had explained to you earlier that I was going to have my character really start struggling throughout the journey with being in close quarters with his family. And he made the decision that he hated his family and decided that he wished that he stayed back without them and that they left him because he was really angry and he's just so stressed and nobody's getting along and the conditions on the boat were just so horrible that Johnny really just took on this really negative outlook. And once they got to New York City, they pulled into New York Harbor, they saw the Statue of Liberty, they knew they'd arrived, they entered Ellis Island, and all of a sudden Johnny realizes he hasn't been feeling well in the past couple of days. And when he gets there, when they get into Ellis Island and they go through the screening process, the guards, the agents realize that he's sick. And a scene starts to unfold where there is a chance that Johnny is going to be separated from his family. And they tell the family that they can stay, but Johnny would have to actually return to Italy by himself. And obviously his parents wouldn't want that to happen. And his brother and his sister, you know, show him how much they love him. And they just kind of all come together to get through this very harrowing, very scary experience. Johnny has to be quarantined. Johnny has to be separated. There's just a lot of uncertainty that the family, and especially Johnny, comes to deal with. And as they get through this experience, as I said, this is the turning point and things are changing. They realize that Johnny is actually not that sick and he is able to recover in just a couple of days, and they're able to stay there together. And through this experience, Johnny learns the lesson that I spoke about yesterday, which I said was really going to be the theme of my story, which is that family is one of the most important things in life. And through this experience, Johnny realized, wow, I actually love my family so much that what I was thinking before, that wasn't right. I just was going through something tough, just like everybody else. But through this experience, he learned this lesson that his family really is one of the most important things in his life. And he's just so much more grateful that they get to stay together because of this experience that he just went through. So you can see, I was very clear how I turned the story, how I solved the problem, and how I highlighted what the actual theme of my story is. So I was able to do three things in this journal entry. I can probably imagine that this journal entry was probably going to be a long one. And if you, being a good writer, if you feel like you want to split this up into two separate ones because you just feel like there's a lot happening, you are absolutely free to do that. And after I took my, I summarized the diary entry on my Post-it, I went along and I placed it with the rest of my Post-its on my story mountain like so. So next, I'm starting to write my falling actions. Now that the problem's been solved, things need to start getting better for the character, okay? They need to start coming back down the other side of that mountain where things start getting better and better and better still. So I might talk more about the Ellis Island experience. I can talk about what they were able, if they were able to, what happens when they leave Ellis Island, okay? And I just revealed in my story that they were actually able to leave Ellis Island. And I'm assuming for the sake of your story, you do want them to most likely leave Ellis Island because there's a lot more story to tell once they get through Ellis Island. You can talk about what they do when they get to Manhattan. What does this new life have in store for them? What is that going to look like? And how are things starting to get better? Okay. So I talked about how Johnny and his family left Ellis Island. They were able to get to Manhattan, to Little Italy, Mulberry Street area. They ended up finding an apartment on Orchard Street, a tenement. And if you took the virtual field trip to the Tenement Museum, which we posted a couple weeks ago, you should know a lot about the tenements as well. A one-room apartment for the entire family, for all five of them. They had little money and food, but at least they were together. So do you see how I'm reinforcing that theme? That family is one of the most important things in life. And you really want to do that. You want to take, once you know your theme, you want to put little dashes of your theme throughout the story because that really links the story together. So once I summarize this event on my story mountain, I take it, I place it on my story mountain like so. Now it's on to my second falling action. You can talk about what life is actually like for them in New York City. Remember, they're in a new place. This is totally new for them, speaking a new language, new people. Everything is new, and it creates such a creative space for you to write about. It's really, really interesting. You can talk about what life was like for them in there. They can talk about what their parents were doing, work. You can talk about what the children were doing. Were they going to school? Were they working? And how are things getting even better still? Because remember, we're still coming down the backside of that mountain. So we still need things to be getting better and better and better. So I summarized it as Gianni's dad found a job in a textile factory and his mom is cleaning windows, also making money. So they are kind of achieving what they were hoping for and making more money and having a better life. They have some more work to do and some more steps to take, but they're on their way. His older brother's selling newspapers. Gianni is finally able to go back to school. He doesn't have to work the farm anymore. And guess what? He's already becoming a better reader, which is something that he had wanted to do from the beginning. And when I started developing this character, I felt that that was something important, an important internal quality of his, that I notice that I connected it all the way from last week when I was developing this character, and I brought it with me all through the story. That internal quality never left him. I always kept it in mind. And how are things, and then he is making friends with other Italian kids in the neighborhood, and things just seem to be getting better and better each day. So I go ahead and I add my 7th Post-it to my story mountain. And finally, my 8th event, most likely I think it's a really great idea for you to flash forward, okay? So maybe flash forward a year and talk about what is life like 1 year after their immigration journey, because that's really important to know kind of how things turned out, okay? And I'm gonna point out another thing in 1 minute, why it's so important for us to flash forward. So if you flash forward a year, you might talk about what life is like now for them, now that they've lived in America for a while. You might wanna talk about, have they achieved their search for a better life? Did they get what they wanted? Did they find the life that they were dreaming of? And this is what I was talking about a second ago. This is kind of the big driving question that we should always keep in the back of our head when we're learning about immigration, when we're writing about immigration, when we're thinking about immigration, which is, was the immigration journey worth the trouble? So was it worth it to sit on that boat with disease and vermin and no food for 2 to 3 weeks? Was it worth it to leave their families and their homes and the only people in home that they ever knew? Was it worth it to, put their children through this experience, put themselves through this experience, to take on the new pressures of living in a new country and having to learn a new language? Was it worth it? And if you can if you can flash forward a year from their original immigration journey and talk about what life is better like now, you'll be better equipped to answer that question for them. Was the journey better? Well, I'm sorry, was the journey worth it? So flash forward a year, and Gianni and his family were able to move to a bigger apartment. So there's more rooms, more beds. Their parents even opened their own business, a little general store on the corner of Orchard Street. And guess what? Gianni's mom is having a baby, and he says that this baby is going to be the first person in his family to be truly American. So I would say, based on all that, the immigration journey probably was worth it for the DeSanto family. And I want you to think about that. I want you to think about your story kind of as a linear whole from beginning to end. You want to think about that story and where you're taking it from the beginning to the end. And you should know that path. And what is going to provide that path for you is this completed story mountain right here, and which is why I want you to have this completed, looking very similar to mine by the end of this lesson. Okay, so your assignment today, if you did not already complete the last 4 events on your story mountain throughout this lesson, you need to do that now. And your story mountain should look as similar to mine as possible. Today, you are going to be uploading a picture of your completed story mountain into slide 11 of your historical fiction e-writer's notebook. Your teacher needs to see your completed story mountain before you start drafting your diary entries. It's important that you're able to do this, so if you have any technical difficulties, please reach out to your teacher. Your teacher probably provided instructions to do this, and if you have other ways of doing it other than the instructions that you were given, by all means do that. It's really important that you get that picture uploaded, though, because we want to comment on it, we want to look at it, and we want to see what an awesome path you set for yourself to write these diary entries. Okay, see you later.